Welcome the anointed ones. Some enemies don't die. They just replay the moment you outsmarted them for the rest of their miserable lives. They thought they were running the game. They were so sure you were the pawn, predictable, disposable, forgettable. But what they didn't see coming was your final move. And now, checkmate. No rematch, no recovery. You see, studies in neuroscience have proven that the human brain replays shame and regret longer than joy. Especially when someone gets publicly outplayed by the very person they tried to destroy. That's not just pain. That's psychological torture on repeat. So while you've moved on and upgraded, they're still haunted by the exact moment their mask slipped, their scheme collapsed, and your power went undeniable. It's not just that you won. It's that you did it so gracefully, it robbed them of their favorite comeback, victimhood. And let's be honest, they were expecting you to crash. Instead, you left the stage glowing, while they're still backstage trying to rewrite the script like it's an episode of How I Gaslit the Wrong One. This episode is your confirmation. They will never forget the day you delivered divine checkmate. Let's talk about the haunting. Not the kind with ghosts, but the kind that plays on loop in the hearts of liars. Strap in. This isn't just a story. It's a spiritual post-mortem. Number 1. You didn't fight back. You outgrew the battlefield. They were ready for a fight, ready for drama, chaos, and a war of words. They baited you, provoked you, and planned for the moment you'd explode so they could say, "See, that's who they really are." But you didn't take the bait. You didn't show up to the battlefield, not because you were weak, but because you had already outgrown the entire game. That's what's haunting them. It's not just that you didn't engage. It's that you saw the whole setup for what it really was. A distraction. You saw their fake arguments, their fake tears, their fake loyalty, and you chose evolution over ego. While they were busy building traps and spinning lies, you were building yourself. They were strategizing ways to break you. You were strategizing ways to break cycles. And when the moment came, instead of clapping back, you elevated. That was your checkmate. Not a loud confrontation, but a quiet exit that left their hands swinging in the air, looking foolish and exposed. The haunting comes from the fact that you didn't even need to retaliate to win. Your growth made their attack look childish. Your peace made their chaos look unhinged. They were performing, and you simply left the stage. That's the part they can't stop thinking about. How do you destroy someone who refuses to play your game? You don't. And that's why your absence became louder than any argument you could have had. They wanted a war to justify their hate. Instead, you gave them silence wrapped in success. You let them watch you grow, heal, and rise, while they stayed stuck in the same petty loops. You didn't just outplay them. You outgrew the need to play at all. And that's a level of power they never anticipated, and definitely never prepared for. That's why they'll never forget you. Because your exit wasn't an escape, it was a revelation. Number 2, you let the truth breathe, and it inhaled their masks. You didn't have to drag them. You didn't have to go online and post receipts. You didn't gather a crowd or try to convince people of your side. You just let the truth breathe. And the longer it breathed, the more their masks started to crack. At first, they felt confident, thought they had the upper hand. They lied on your name, twisted your words, flipped the script, and expected you to panic, but you didn't. You knew something they didn't. Time is truth's best friend. And lies have a short shelf life. You weren't interested in proving anything. You didn't need to scream to be heard. You just let life unfold. And it did. People started noticing inconsistencies, contradictions. The energy wasn't adding up. The calm in you didn't match the chaos in their stories. Over time, the lies they told started falling apart, not because you exposed them, but because you didn't need to. Their own actions started exposing them piece by piece. What eats at them now isn't just regret, it's humiliation. You didn't curse them out. You didn't clap back. You didn't even break character. That stillness, that peace you carried, that was power. The truth worked for you while you worked on yourself. You became a walking contradiction to everything they said about you. And that contrast? That's what burns them daily. The truth has a way of aging well. Lies don't. And the longer you stayed quiet, the louder the truth became. Not just in your words, but in your life. Your peace, your elevation, your authenticity. It all told the story they tried to bury. But you didn't need to dig up anything. They dug their own grave by counting on your silence being weakness when it was actually wisdom. And now, they walk around haunted, not by what you did, but by what you didn't do. You let the truth breathe, and it inhaled everything fake about them. Number 3, you didn't just leave, you took their narrative with you. They thought you were just another chapter they could control, a character they could rewrite when it suited them, someone they could talk about forever, dragging your name into every conversation to boost their ego or gain sympathy. But what they didn't expect was for you to walk away and take the story with you. That's what really broke them. You left, but you didn't leave quietly. You took back the narrative they tried to hijack. You reclaimed your identity, and suddenly, the version of you they had built their lies on started to crumble. They wanted to define you as the unstable one, the emotional one, the fake one. But when you stepped back and started thriving, healing, and glowing on your own terms, their story stopped making sense. People started asking questions. The facts weren't lining up. Their audience wasn't clapping like before. And without you feeding the drama, the whole performance lost power. What really messes with them is the realization that your absence speaks more clearly than any accusation ever could. They relied on twisting your actions, retelling your past, and rebranding your pain. But you stopped showing up for that role. You didn't just move on. You matured, elevated, transformed, and in doing that, you destroyed the entire plot they were using to stay relevant or play victim. They're still trying to recycle your name like it's a punchline, but nobody's laughing anymore. Because people see you now, not through their lens, but through your presence, your actions, your fruit. And that new light you carry doesn't match the shadow they tried to cast over you. So now they're stuck, still holding on to a version of you that doesn't exist, still trying to replay scenes from a story you've already rewritten. That's the haunting part. You weren't just a person they lost. You were the foundation of a lie they can no longer sell. And once you took the truth with you, they lost all control. Number 4, your growth made their gossip expire overnight. They talked like they had you figured out, like their version of your story would be the final one. They whispered, exaggerated, mocked, and gossiped with confidence, thinking the identity they assigned you would stick forever. But the problem is, you didn't stay in place long enough for their lies to stay relevant. While they were busy running their mouths, you were outgrowing every false label they slapped on you. You evolved too fast for the rumors to keep up. And now, the same people they tried to turn against you are watching you become someone completely different. Stronger, wiser, more grounded. That's the sting. Not just that you moved on, but that your transformation made their gossip sound ridiculous. The timelines don't match anymore. People are comparing your actions now to the trash they said about you back then, and nothing adds up. The things they accused you of, you don't even operate on that level anymore. You're not reacting, not breaking, not begging for validation. You're walking in power, and they're stuck recycling an outdated version of you that no longer exists. They tried to freeze your character in a past you already healed from. They didn't expect you to rise. They didn't expect you to grow so much that their lies would look like petty fiction in the face of your reality. And now, they look obsessed, bitter, and behind. Because while you were maturing, they were repeating the same tired script, and the audience is no longer entertained. The most brutal part for them is that they can't update the lie without admitting the truth. To revise the gossip would mean acknowledging your growth, and they can't do that without exposing their own jealousy. So they sit there, humiliated by the fact that their narrative expired overnight, and you didn't have to defend yourself once. You just evolved. And now their favorite story is dead, not because you silenced it, but because life outgrew the lie. Number 5, they needed you broken, but you healed loudly in silence. They didn't just hurt you, they needed you to stay hurt. Your brokenness served a purpose for them. It made them feel powerful, superior, and in control. As long as you were wounded, they could paint themselves as the savior or the victim, depending on what role helped their image the most. That's why every time you tried to rise, they found a new way to pull you back down, through guilt, manipulation, lies, or emotional sabotage. You weren't just a person to them. You were a project they could dismantle at will. But what they didn't expect was that your healing would happen, and that it would echo louder than any revenge plot they feared. You didn't announce your comeback. You didn't throw it in their face. You didn't make a scene. You just got quiet. But your silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. In that silence, you were rebuilding, regenerating, learning. And when you came back, you didn't look like someone who had been patched up. You looked brand new, stronger, clearer, untouchable. And that, right there, is what exposed them. Because now the world can see, you weren't the problem. You were the target. You weren't unstable. You were under attack. You weren't weak. You were wounded. But even with all that, you still rose. Now they don't know what to do with themselves. Your healing stripped away their excuses. It ruined their narrative. It shined a light on their actions in a way no words ever could. You became the evidence that they were never in your corner, and worse, that they were afraid of what you'd become once you healed. They were prepared for your collapse. They weren't ready for your resurrection. And now that you're here, whole, wise, and free, the only thing louder than your silence is their shame. Number 6, you didn't react, you rebuilt. They were counting on your reaction. That was the whole strategy. They wanted you to explode, to lose control, to embarrass yourself so they could point and say, see, that's who they really are. Every insult, every betrayal, every setup was designed to trigger you into a meltdown they could weaponize. But instead of reacting, you redirected. You took all the fire they threw at you and used it to build something unshakable. Yourself. That's what they never saw coming. You didn't respond with rage or retaliation. You went quiet but not passive. You were working behind the scenes, turning pain into purpose, turning anger into clarity. You didn't waste time explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You used that time to evolve. And now the results speak for themselves, louder and clearer than any reaction ever could. They thought they were burning you alive. What they didn't realize is that you weren't burning. You were refining. You were being sharpened, not shattered. While they celebrated your supposed downfall, you were rising in ways they never imagined. And now that you've rebuilt yourself with all the wisdom, strength, and spiritual armor they never wanted you to have, they're left stunned and humiliated. What haunts them now isn't just that you survived, it's how you survived. You didn't fight dirty, you didn't stoop to their level. You turned your back on the drama, and in that space you created something sacred, your comeback. And it didn't come with noise, it came with evidence, growth they can't deny, peace they can't shake, strength they can't sabotage. Their fire didn't destroy you, it forged you. And now they're stuck watching the masterpiece they accidentally helped create, knowing they gave it their best shot, and still lost. That's not just haunting them, that's humbling them. Number 7. You starved their ego of the attention it needed to survive. They craved attention. Not resolution, not healing, not truth. Just attention. They wanted to provoke you, not because they were hurt, but because they were hungry for control. Every lie, every insult, every underhanded move was designed to keep you emotionally hooked. They needed you to react, defend, explain, overextend, because that's what fed their ego. If they could keep you locked in a tug of war, they could feel powerful, relevant, like the center of your universe. But you didn't play. You didn't give them the reaction they were counting on. You didn't scream. You didn't go chasing closure or trying to clear your name to people who were never on your side to begin with. You simply walked away and left their egos starving in silence. And that silence, that's where the real power kicked in. Because egos don't survive without an audience. And when you stopped responding, you ended the show. You took away the stage, the spotlight, and the script. You stopped giving them airtime in your life, and suddenly, they were just another person talking to themselves. No attention, no reaction, no relevance. And now, they're left pacing the same circles, telling the same tired story, but it doesn't land like it used to. Because the version of you they're talking about doesn't exist anymore. You grew, you elevated, you matured, and their narrative can't keep up with your reality. What once sounded convincing now sounds bitter and desperate. Their ego is collapsing under its own weight. It fed off your energy, and without it, it's shrinking into nothing. And that's the real punishment. Not revenge, not karma, just the slow death of their self-importance as you continue to rise, untouched, unbothered, and uninterested. You starved the drama until it stopped breathing. And now they're stuck in the corner of a story that nobody's buying anymore, whispering about a version of you that's long gone. Number 8. You became the proof that God hears private injustice. They did things behind closed doors that they swore would never see daylight. Not just petty gossip or childish jabs, real spiritual crimes, emotional sabotage, intentional betrayal, smiling in your face while stabbing you in the soul. They thought because no one saw it, it wouldn't matter, that if they kept it quiet enough, they'd get away with it. But they forgot one thing. God saw it all. What they didn't expect was for you to not only survive it, but to become the evidence that divine justice is real. You weren't just hurt. You were buried, and they waited for you to rot. But instead, you rose, and you didn't just come back looking the same. You came back transformed, elevated, set apart. They watched in disbelief as the very suffering they tried to use against you became the stage for your testimony. That's what makes your presence so hard for them to process. You are living proof that private injustice does not go unnoticed by heaven. They whispered lies about you in dark corners, and now your truth is being shouted from platforms they never imagined you'd stand on. They tried to ruin your name, and now your name is being called in rooms they can't access. That's not coincidence. That's divine orchestration. Your healing is embarrassing them. Your growth is a judgment they can't run from. Because no matter how much they try to deny it, the contrast is undeniable. You glowed up without bitterness. You elevated without revenge. You forgave without forgetting. And everything about your life now screams that God took it personally. They wanted to hurt you in secret and watch you crumble quietly. But instead you became a walking contradiction to everything they thought would destroy you. And the worst part? They can't wash it off. They can't erase your breakthrough. Because every time they see you thrive, they're reminded that God saw what they did and decided you were the one worth rebuilding. Number 9. You triggered the collapse of their whole persona. They needed you to stay in character, the one they assigned you, the loyal one, the quiet one, the one who tolerated too much and asked for too little. You were never allowed to question, outgrow, or detach. Because if you ever stopped playing that role, their whole facade would fall apart. And that's exactly what happened. You didn't lash out. You didn't seek revenge. You just stopped participating. You refused to shrink anymore just to keep the peace. And when you did that, it wasn't just a personal shift. It caused their entire persona to collapse. The truth is, their identity was never built on truth. It was built on your compliance. They looked stable because you were carrying the emotional weight. They looked kind because you kept covering their cruelty. They looked wise because you kept letting them speak over your intuition. But once you stepped back and reclaimed your voice, it became obvious just how much they were leaning on you to look like something they never were. Now, they're spiraling, scrambling to rebrand themselves, trying to find a new audience, a new narrative, a new target to control. But nothing is sticking, because the mask only worked when you were part of the illusion. Without you propping it up, it's just a hollow act. And people are starting to notice the charm is wearing off. The cracks are showing. And worst of all for them, you're no longer there to fix it or explain it away. They told people you needed them, but the second you left, they fell apart. That's the irony. You were the backbone of the story they told to feel important. And now, they're left trying to hold up a lie with no support. That's what haunts them. Not that you left, but that you were the one holding it all together the entire time, and they didn't realize it until you stopped. Number 10. You're the living reminder that they were wrong. They were so sure they had you figured out, so confident in the lies they told, the labels they placed on you, the limits they tried to convince others, and maybe even you, were real. They thought they could reduce you to a single moment, a bad decision or a low season. And they bragged about it, mocked you, warned others about you, made you the cautionary tale in rooms where you weren't even present to defend yourself. But now, you've become the living reminder that everything they believed, everything they said was wrong. You weren't the weak one. You weren't the unstable one. You weren't the problem. You were the one evolving quietly, learning deeply, and healing honestly. And now your very existence contradicts every word they ever spoke against you. That's not just success, that's exposure. Every win you have, every door that opens, every compliment you receive, every person that respects you now is a direct correction to the story they tried to stamp on your life. What eats at them is the fact that you never had to clap back. You just kept growing. And with every level you reached, it became clearer to everyone. They misjudged you. They spoke too soon, treated you too poorly. And now, every time your name comes up in a good light, it triggers a discomfort they can't shake, because it forces them to see that their version of you never held up. The narrative is broken. You broke it, not by attacking them, but by becoming everything they said you'd never be. Your glow is a spotlight, not just on your growth, but on their failure to see your worth. And they can't rewrite that now. The evidence is too strong. Your transformation is too loud. Your presence is undeniable. You're not a grudge they hold. You're a mirror they avoid. Because looking at you now means confronting the truth. They were loud, they were wrong, and you were always more than they could handle. Number 11. You made their curse backfire into their own timeline. They didn't just wish for your downfall, they plotted for it. Some of them did it openly through gossip, sabotage, and manipulation. Others did it in secret, with jealousy, evil intentions, and spiritual warfare disguised as fake concern. They sent out energy meant to break you, slow you down, or poison your name. And when it didn't work, they thought maybe you got lucky. But what they didn't realize was that you had something they could never account for. Spiritual insurance. You were covered in a way they couldn't see or understand. You weren't just protected. You were anointed. And because they were operating from a place of ego, they underestimated the divine authority that surrounded you. So when they launched those attacks, they didn't just miss. They triggered something spiritual they weren't prepared to handle. That darkness they aimed at you, it started turning back around, slowly, then suddenly. And now it's detonating in their own lives. Doors are closing, relationships are crumbling, peace is evaporating. Not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves. The energy they sent returned to sender, multiplied and intensified. And now they're dealing with the fallout of what they tried to sow in secret. That's the part that really haunts them. Not guilt, but the shocking realization that they invited this chaos into their own lives by messing with someone divinely protected. They can't say it out loud, but they know deep down. Everything started falling apart when they came for you. The timing is too precise. The pattern's too obvious. They mocked your connection to God, but now they're realizing it wasn't a performance. It was real. You weren't just spiritually grounded, you were spiritually armed. And the attack they thought would finish you became the moment they unknowingly sealed their own fate. That's why they can't sleep. That's why they're paranoid. Because now they know the curse didn't land on you. It boomeranged. And the pain they're feeling, it's just the echo of their own intentions crashing back into their timeline. Number 12. You became the blueprint they secretly follow. They did everything they could to discredit you. They mocked your journey, made fun of your mindset, laughed at your authenticity. When you were speaking truth, they called it delusion. When you were building yourself up, they called it fake. When you were walking in your calling, they called it attention-seeking. They tried to strip you of credibility in every way, publicly doubting you so others would stay away from whatever light you were carrying. But now, they're copying you piece by piece, move by move, while pretending they don't see you at all. They mimic your language. Your phrases suddenly sound familiar coming out of their mouths. The very tone they once rolled their eyes at is now stitched into their captions and posts. The style they used to mock is now showing up in their wardrobe or content. The strength they tried to downplay, now it's the attitude they're trying to embody. And here's the twist. They can't stop watching you, quietly, consistently, obsessively. You became the very blueprint they can't admit they needed. But it's not admiration. It's silent torment. Because deep down, they know what they're doing. They know that the person they tried to bury became the very example they can't stop following. And that contradiction is tearing them apart. Every time they try to replicate your energy, they're reminded that you had it first, and that you never needed to copy anyone to stand out. They want the results you have, the glow you carry, the peace you walk in, but without the process, without the pain, without the cost. So they imitate the outer image, hoping it will produce the same inner power. But it doesn't, because what they're copying is just the surface. What they can't fake is your alignment, your intention, your spiritual backing. And that's what frustrates them most. They shamed you, then studied you. And now they're stuck living a lie, trying to be a version of you they said would never go anywhere. That internal war between pride and truth, that's what's eating them alive. Number 13. You shattered their power without lifting a finger. They thrived off control. Their whole sense of power was built on manipulation, confusion, and intimidation. They didn't know how to connect without dominating. If they couldn't outshine you, they'd try to overshadow you. If they couldn't lead you, they'd try to limit you. Their tactics were rooted in fear. Not just the fear they used to keep others small, but the fear they had of being exposed as smaller than they pretended to be. But you didn't fight back in the way they expected. You didn't get loud. You didn't beg for understanding or argue your worth. You didn't plot or retaliate. You simply aligned. You got grounded in who you are, who you're becoming, and what God was doing in your life. And that choice, to stop playing by their rules and start living by your truth, shattered everything they had built. They didn't understand that your alignment was your weapon, that your peace was power, that your refusal to engage in their games was a silent rebellion they had no defense for. They tried to drag you into chaos, but you didn't show up. You didn't try to one-up them, clap back, or prove anything. You just became. And somehow, in the process of becoming your truest self, their false power unraveled. What destroys them now is the realization that you took everything from them without laying a hand. You dismantled their influence without lifting a finger. Because once you removed yourself from their reach, their control collapsed. Their ego didn't survive your evolution. Their tactics stopped working when you stopped reacting. Now they're left powerless. Not because you destroyed them, but because their power was only ever effective against people who didn't know who they were. And you do now. You know your value, your voice, your purpose, and that's why they can't forget you. Because in the end, you didn't just walk away. You walked away with your dignity intact and their illusion in pieces. Number 14, you weren't just a chapter, you were the revelation. They thought you were just passing through, a temporary figure, a lesson they could twist, a phase they'd quickly forget. They treated you like a chapter they could skim through, misread, and move on from. But you weren't a chapter. You were the revelation. The moment in their life that forced everything fake to collapse under the weight of truth. You didn't just disrupt their story, you exposed it. You weren't loud about it. You didn't go around declaring yourself a prophet or a turning point. You simply lived with honesty, depth, and clarity. And that was enough to make their shallow performance unbearable. Being around you required them to confront everything they were pretending to be. The masks didn't fit anymore when they stood next to someone who had nothing to hide. That's why your presence became uncomfortable. Not because you attacked, but because you reflected. You were a mirror they didn't ask for, but couldn't look away from. They mocked you, pushed you away, downplayed your importance. But deep down, they knew something shifted the moment you entered their life. Their excuses didn't work the same. Their manipulation didn't land like it used to. Their false confidence started cracking. Because you weren't just another person. You were the moment truth walked in wearing a familiar face. And now that you're gone, they can't stop thinking about it. You weren't forgettable. You were unforgettable in the most inconvenient way. Every time they run into someone with your level of clarity, authenticity, or strength, they're reminded of what they lost and why. That's the thing about revelations. They don't ask for permission. They just arrive, shift everything, and leave a permanent mark. You didn't just show them who you were. You showed them who they weren't ready to admit they had become. And that's a kind of truth no one forgets. Because once a person has seen themselves clearly, they can never go back to pretending again. No matter how hard they try to erase the one who made them see. And that's why they can't forget you. Not because you were loud, not because you fought dirty, but because you delivered something their soul wasn't ready for, a divine checkmate. You didn't destroy them with rage. You dismantled them with truth, with growth, with silence laced in wisdom. You became the proof that elevation doesn't need validation. And healing doesn't require an audience. They thought they could define you, confine you, and dismiss you. But every move you made outside their control rewrote the story they tried to trap you in. They called it weakness, but it was strategy. They called it running, but it was resurrection. You outgrew their version of you, and now they're left haunted by a simple but undeniable fact. You won. And the win wasn't just for you. It was spiritual. It was ancestral. It was karmic. You broke the cycle, turned their curses into catalysts, and walked out of the fire with the blueprint they're now secretly studying. You're not just unforgettable. You're undeniable. Your presence forced truth to the surface. Your absence exposed the void they can't fill. And your life now serves as the final verdict. They were wrong about you. And they'll live with that far longer than they ever lived with you. Stay aligned, stay elevated, stay unbothered. The checkmate already happened. Now, it's just echoes. This message stirred something deep in your spirit. Don't keep it to yourself. Like this video if you felt the truth. Comment below and let me know which part hit the hardest. I read every one of them. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their silence, strength, and survival was the move that changed the game. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and join this growing community of chosen ones rising in truth, power, and divine alignment. We don't play by their rules. We're building something higher. Tap in. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You're chosen. And you're just getting started. God bless you.